The fire is the only light for miles. Somewhere out past the tree line, an owl calls once and goes quiet. There's no other tent here, no second headlamp bobbing through the dark. Just one person, one small fire, and a silence so complete you can hear your own heartbeat if you sit still long enough. If you saw this from a distance, you'd probably assume something was wrong. Nobody's out here by choice, right? Something must have happened. A breakup, a burnout, some kind of trouble they don't want to talk about. Here's the strange part. Ask that person directly, and most of the time, nothing happened at all. No crisis, no breakdown. Just someone who figured out something most people never get the chance to test, and built a quiet habit around it. That assumption, that solitude equals something broken, is one of the most common misreadings there is. In everyday life, choosing to be alone gets treated like a warning sign. A coworker skips the group lunch, people start asking if he's okay. A friend cancels plans just to sit at home, people worry. So when someone spends a weekend completely alone in the woods, on purpose, the instinct is to assume they're avoiding people or avoiding something painful. But being alone and being lonely are not the same animal at all. Loneliness is wanting people around and not having them. This is the opposite. This is having people you could absolutely call and choosing the fire and the dark instead, because that's what the mind is actually asking for tonight. Listen to the woods for a second. There's no phone buzzing in a pocket, no Slack notification lighting up a screen somewhere, no one's mood to read, no one's schedule to work around. Compare that to an ordinary day. A message that needs an answer, a meeting that needs a version of you that's paying attention, a decision someone else is waiting on. Even the couch at the end of the day usually comes with some version of this humming in the background. Out here, all of it just stops. Nothing needs anything from this person. Nothing is waiting on a reply. There is the fire, the cold air, and whatever thought happens to drift through, uninterrupted, for the first time and longer than they can remember. People who do this again and again describe the same thing almost word for word. It takes a full day, sometimes closer to 2, before the noise in their head actually settles. Not because the forest is magic, because there's finally nothing left to react to.
But it doesn't happen the moment the tent goes up. Almost everyone who camps alone describes the same uncomfortable first stretch. The first hour or two feels wrong, almost too quiet, like a room with the television just switched off. The mind, so used to having something to chew on, starts reaching for anything. A work email that hasn't been sent, a conversation from 3 days ago that didn't land quite right. It replays things that don't matter anymore simply because it's used to having something running at all times. This is the part almost nobody films, because it isn't peaceful, it's restless and a little uncomfortable, and most people who try this once and never again usually quit right here, mistaking the restlessness for a sign that something's wrong. The people who keep coming back have learned to just sit through that part, not fight it, not distract from it, just let the fire do its slow work while the noise runs itself out. And at some point, usually well after dark, usually somewhere around the second cup of coffee the next cold morning, it actually happens. The chewing stops. There's nothing left circling, just the sound of the fire settling and the occasional shift of wind through branches that haven't dropped their leaves yet. Now picture the fire refusing to catch. The wood's slightly damp, the wind keeps stealing the flame, and there is exactly one person here to solve it. No one to hand it off to, no one to ask what they do instead, just trial, failure, adjustment until it finally holds. That moment, small as it sounds, does something. A quiet part of the mind takes note. Handled that. Do this enough times across enough small problems out here, and something shifts permanently. The need for someone else's reassurance starts to fade because the evidence is already sitting in memory, collected alone, with nobody around to hand out credit for it. There's something else that only shows up when nobody else is watching. The same steep, exhausting climb feels completely different depending on who's beside you. In a group, even a good one, there's a quiet performance built into it. Nobody wants to be the one who's tired first. Out here, that entire pressure disappears. If the legs need a break, they get one. If a moment is hard, it's hard in private, with no audience and nothing to prove. And oddly, that seems to be exactly why the hardest solo nights are the ones people remember years later in sharp detail, while a dozen easy group trips blur into one forgettable weekend.
Night out here has its own soundtrack, and the first few trips, every part of it sounds like a threat. A branch cracks somewhere off to the left, and every muscle goes tight. Something rustles through dry leaves, and the mind jumps straight to the worst possible explanation before logic has a chance to catch up. This is normal, and it fades with repetition, not because the woods get quieter, but because the mind slowly builds a library of what these sounds actually are. A crack that means a branch settling under its own weight. A rustle that means nothing bigger than a rodent. Fewer sounds get flagged as dangerous over time, not because the person stopped being careful, but because they finally have enough real experience to tell the difference between something worth worrying about and something that's simply the forest breathing at night. Now, here's the part worth being completely honest about, because glossing over it would be dishonest. All of this makes solitude sound almost peaceful, almost safe. It isn't, not entirely. Camping alone genuinely carries more risk than camping with others, for one simple reason. If something goes wrong out here, an injury, a sudden storm, a piece of gear failing at the worst possible moment, there is no one else to catch it. That part isn't a myth, it's just true. What tends to get missed is how the people who take this seriously actually respond to that risk. They don't get careless because they're alone, they get more careful, more conservative planning, more backup gear than they'd ever bother packing for a group trip. More attention paid to the sky, the terrain, the hour, because they know exactly what happens if they're wrong and no one's there to fix it. The pull towards solitude explains why someone chooses this. It says nothing about whether it's safe for any one person, on any one night, in any one place. Those are two entirely different questions, and only one of them is about psychology. So what does a person actually walk away with once the fires died down to embers and the tents packed back into the truck? There's a specific moment worth mentioning here, one almost every solo camper describes the same way. It's not the night itself, it's the drive back the next morning, radio off, windows cracked, watching the trees thin out and the first gas station sign appear. That's usually when it lands. Not relief exactly, more like clarity. The kind that only shows up after enough quiet to actually notice it arriving. Ask them what they actually walk away with, and the answer is almost never dramatic. Usually it's something closer to this. It's the only hour of their week where the mind is genuinely, completely quiet. No performance, no one's expectations to track, just wood smoke, cold air, and whatever thought finally had enough room to finish itself. It was never really about running from anything. It was about a mind with nothing left demanding its attention, even for a night, before the noise of everything ordinary comes rushing back in at first light.